Spoiler alert. This episode contains spoilers of the topic, probably a movie or TV show. If you want to watch the said movie or TV show without knowing anything about it, stop this video and go watch it, unless you've watched it already. Then continue with the video. So I'm definitely stating the obvious, but watching Disney movies can feel like a nostalgic time travel back to innocent times, when all we had to worry about was getting our homework done. Disney movies would take us out of reality for a moment and bring us into a world of animation or live-action fantasy. Even if Walt Disney's head is rumored to be cryogenically frozen in the depths of Disneyland or Disney World, Disney films have a very nostalgic place in my heart, especially their Pixar films, whether it's their shorts or feature films. Speaking of features, let's go back to their very first feature film, which happens to be celebrating its 30th anniversary. A story about a living cowboy doll and his toy astronaut friend. You're going to find out about the making and history of Toy Story on this episode of Pointless History. Toy Story is about a group of living toys led by a cowboy doll named Woody. They're preparing for a big move to a new house with their owner Andy, as well as keeping track of the gifts that he receives on his 6th birthday, in which Andy receives a Buzz Lightyear action figure. Tension and jealousy between Woody and Buzz boils, eventually leading them to become lost and going on an adventure to find their way back home to Andy before the big move. Along the way, they have run-ins with a sadistic toy torturer named Sid, his Frankenstein toys, and his dog Scud. During the adventure, Woody and Buzz evolve, get to know about themselves more, and accept each other for who they are. It goes back to John Lasseter. He was originally an animator at Disney, starting in 1979. It wasn't until he was introduced to CGI through conferences and from the light cycle sequences from Tron, thanks to his friends Jerry Rees and Bill Croyer, who were working on the latter, he had an epiphany about animated movies. After considering making the Brave Little Toaster a hodgepodge of 2D animation with CGI 3D backgrounds, while doing a test short film based on where the wild things are, along with unintentionally ruffling the feathers of the higher-ups, the project was canned and John Lasseter was fired from Disney. What most would think is a loss was actually a blessing in disguise. Pixar started off as the graphics group of Lucasfilm Computer Division in 1979, eventually changing to Pixar in 1986, with funding coming from the late Steve Jobs. John Lasseter was hired at Pixar after his Disney firing. Between 1984 and 89, Pixar with John Lasseter made 5 short films between commercial and film work. One of those short films was Tin Toy. It's about a wind-up one-man band toy being stalked by a toddler. This would be the prototype to Toy Story and the catalyst for Pixar films. After Tin Toy won 2 Academy Awards and getting the attention of the new team at the Walt Disney Company, at the time, CEO Michael Eisner and Chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg attempted to bring Lasseter back to Disney. Lasseter, remaining faithful to Pixar, made a deal with Katzenberg that Lasseter and Pixar would make a feature film with Disney. Toy Story originally was going to have Tinny from Tin Toy as the main character, who gets lost and left behind at a gas station. Tinny then gets picked up by a junk man, leading him to meet a ventriloquist dummy with the same overall goal as Tinny, to have children play with them. Eventually, they would find themselves, as John Lasseter has said, in Toy Heaven, a preschool class where they would be played with and keep kids entertained for the rest of their lives. That's actually kind of scary to think about. Well, if you have a fear of purgatory. Katzenberg was not thrilled with the story, especially with the characters having the same goal. After some changes, it was turned into a typical buddy story, with the 2 main characters having contrasting personalities, leading them to beef until they accepted each other. But as time went on, the two main characters evolved. Pixar felt that Tinny wasn't the right choice as a child's new favorite toy, so Tinny went from a one-man band toy to an army action figure inspired by G.I. Joe, eventually finalized as an astronaut, going through a few different names, like Lunar Larry and Tempest from Morph, eventually landing on Buzz Lightyear, in tribute to Buzz Aldrin. This was a character that all the writers created by taking the best elements of their favorite toys growing up and putting them into one toy. With the ventriloquist dummy, he evolved into a cowboy dummy named Woody, thanks to the idea of Bud Lucky. Most likely inspired by Howdy Doody, which I actually had as a kid, along with Slappy from Goosebumps. That was definitely nightmare fueling. From this, Woody evolved into a pull-string doll, inspired by a Casper the Friendly Ghost doll that John Lasseter had as a child. With Woody being a cowboy and Buzz being an astronaut, it amplified the contrast of the characters. Other toy characters were loosely based on real-life toys, or Pixar got the rights to use well-known toys. Some of the toy characters were given interesting personalities based on how cheap or expensive they were. Rex, for example, is presumed to be a cheap T-Rex toy who ironically is insecure and has anxiety, yet he's based on one of the most violent dinosaurs that ever lived. Mr. Potato Head has a grouchy smart aleck personality based on the fact that his facial features fall off of him so easily. Listen, I'd be angry too if my mustache, or my beard for that matter, fell off too. Pixar tried to get Barbie to be in the movie as a love interest for Woody, but could not get the rights from Mattel. So, they created Bo Peep, a porcelain doll, to fill in that role. Not only did the toy characters evolve, but so did the story and settings. Elements of the original story stayed, but new elements were added. The main setting of the movie would change from a preschool to a child's bedroom. Through this, other settings were incorporated, from the gas station to Pizza Planet to Sid's house, along with the neighborhood, the moving van, and eventually Andy's new home. With John Lasseter directing Toy Story, production started with Andrew Stanton, Josh Whedon, Joel Cohen, and Alec Sokolow writing the screenplay, based on the story that Lasseter, Stanton, Joe Ranft, and Pete Docter had come up with. At the same time, rough and colored illustrations were being drawn of the characters and settings by Ralph Eggleston and crew, to get an overall visual idea of how Pixar wanted the movie to look. Ralph and his crew would go on to design the sets of Toy Story. Early on, short test animations were done by supervising animator Pete Docter, with prototype models of Woody and Buzz. They wanted to see if they could make a whole feature film with these characters, along with test sequences using temporary voice actors and audio excerpts of Tom Hanks and Billy Crystal's voices.
Oh, no, you're eating the car! Don't eat the car! Not the car! No, you stupid dog!
Pixar had nervously shown Disney the test animations, who thankfully approved of it and greenlit the production. From there, storyboards were made to help give an overall idea of how the movie would go. This led to voice actors eventually recording the characters' lines, which would be edited to match up with the storyboards. Speaking of actors, for notable casting, Tom Hanks voiced Woody. Others considered were Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood, and even Robin Williams. It was John Lasseter who wanted to work with and got Tom Hanks on board. Tim Allen voiced Buzz Lightyear. Originally, Pixar was looking to cast Billy Crystal, who passed on the role but later regretted it, but would later on take on the role of Mike Wazowski in Monsters, Inc. Apparently, Pixar even thought about casting Jim Carrey as Buzz. That would have been interesting. At the time, Tim Allen was working on another Disney project, the sitcom Home Improvement. To speed it up, here's the Rolodex of the rest of the cast. The Pixar crew would keep Disney updated with the production progress of Toy Story. While the CGI look was loved, the plot was unimpressive to Katzenberg. He wanted Woody and Buzz to be more snappy, so these characters were reworked, making Woody a more hateful character and Buzz a dim-witted stooge-type character. The storyboard screening of this version was a calamitous event, causing Peter Schneider, the president of Walt Disney Feature Animation at the time, to shut down and even consider canceling production. Lasseter was embarrassed by the way the film was turning out by this point, and even Katzenberg was questioning why the rough cut was so bad. That was until Katzenberg's colleague, Thomas Schumacher, said, because it's not their movie anymore. It's completely not the movie that John set out to make. Lasseter stated, "It was a story filled with the most unhappy, mean characters that I've ever seen, proving that the higher-ups don't have the talent for writing a good movie." Listen, just leave it to the professionals, just stick to the business side of this field and just have a little faith, please. This led to Lasseter with the writers and story artists revising the script and characteristics of Woody and Buzz. Woody would become a more likable leader of the toy group, with Buzz becoming a somewhat sophisticated character based on the knowledge he knows, but lacking self-awareness that he's just a toy. After all this, production for Toy Story would resume in February 1994. Due to the lost time from the production shutdown and revising the story and characters, along with the Pixar crew multiplying like gremlins, Pixar had to ask for more money from Disney. It was already a $17 million production. Luckily, a deal was made for a new budget, increasing to $30 million. The storyboards, along with the voice actors and illustrations, would help give the animation team an idea of how everything in the movie would look and be developed. And I mean everything, from all of the characters to every single blade of the friggin' grass. Some of the animators on Toy Story were traditional 2D animators who had no experience with computer animation. They would go through a 2-week crash course and, for lack of better words, graduate, not really, and start animating Toy Story. Within the animation team were sub-teams, which were very similar to teams you'd find on a film set, except this was all digital. Lasseter wanted everything in Toy Story to have an organic look. The shading team scanned real-life objects along with textures and applied it to everything seen in the movie, from the clothing texture and patterns to the reflections and shadows. To animate the characters and moving objects, the animators worked with 400 computer models that were based on 3D computer drawings and scan clay models, all in Pixar's own software, MenV. From there, the animators coded and did keyframe movements for the characters, with Woody being the most complicated to animate, who had 723 motion controls. In total, there were between 27 to 33 animators in Toy Story. Each animator would produce 8 seconds of animation a week. I repeat, a week. One of the most painstaking things I learned about Toy Story was that the animators had to sync frame by frame the characters' facial expressions and lips to match the actors' voices. Apparently, there was an auto lip sync preset for the animators, but Lasseter felt it wasn't as natural as keyframing the lips. Dude, I'm getting sensory overload just thinking about that. Most computer animations at the time used these exciting, fast-moving aerial camera shots, similar to shots with a camera on a jib rig or a drone in this day and age. The layout department was responsible for compositing shots for Toy Story. They treated the movie as if it were a live-action movie by compositing mostly simple shots, similar to how a cinematographer would composite shots, with the occasional moving aerial shots when needed. One of the interesting animated sequences is the Green Army Men figures. The animators had to figure out how they would commute, since these characters had their feet attached to a base. Pete Docter took a pair of old sneakers, attached them to a piece of plywood, and started moving around as if his feet were attached to a snowboard, which he probably could have done, but listen, us guys just like to do things DIY. This was videotaped and used as inspiration for the animators. A similar sequence was Sid's dog Scud running after Woody and Buzz. The crew looked at the Edward Muybridge photo sequence of a dog running for inspiration on how Scud would run. All the animated kids at Andy's birthday party are the same 3D model as Andy. The hairstyles in the movie were purposely short. With this being the first computer animated movie, the animators didn't really know how to animate long hair. They had to save time and money somehow. In total, the animators created over 110,000 frames of animation, with the computers and softwares working overtime, clocking at 800,000 hours. Here's the kicker. Pixar could only render less than 30 seconds of Toy Story per day. Thank God technology has evolved, and God bless every single animator who worked on this movie. Lee Unkrich and Robert Gordon were the editors of Toy Story, with Lee being the main editor. For them, they had probably the easiest job during the production. It was just a matter of putting the animated sequences in the right order. 2 scenes in particular were left on the cutting room floor. The The scene with Sid burning Woody with the magnifying glass was longer but cut short. It was originally Sid torturing Buzz first, leading to Woody getting tortured. Pixar felt that this scene was just too disturbing. The scene with Woody trapped in the crate, while apologizing to Buzz for his wrongdoings, was also cut short, as the crew felt it was playing out too long and would lose the audience's attention. There was a test screening of Toy Story in the summer of 1995 that led to some approval from the audience, but not as great as Pixar expected. So the movie would be edited and worked on till the deadline, in which the movie would be handed off to the music and sound department. Most Disney films were musicals with the characters breaking out into song and dance, but for Toy Story, Pixar did not want that. Instead, they would have Randy Newman score and create music for the movie, making songs for certain scenes that would describe the characters' emotions. The iconic "You Got a Friend in Me" is the best example. The musical score, along with the dialogue and sound effects, thanks to Gary Rydstrom, were all created, edited, and mixed at Skywalker Sound. Now, before the movie was released, the Pixar crew had anxiety about how the movie would be received by the general public. Ironically, Peter Schneider, who considered canning the project years prior, felt confident that Toy Story would be a success. After being worked on for 3 years, Toy Story had 2 premieres, one by Disney on November 19, 1995 at the El Capitan Theater, and one by Pixar at the Regency Center in San Francisco the next night. Following was the theatrical release on November 22, 1995. From there, it became not only the first full-length computer-animated movie, but one of the best Disney movies ever made, in my opinion. Quoting producer Ralph Guggenheim, "This film was driven by the characters and story first. And even though it is the first ever computer-animated film, the technique is secondary to the story that we wanted to tell." Toy Story led to many sequels, with the 5th movie coming out in the summer of 2026, at the time I'm writing this. There was also video games, which were hard AF, and a boatload of merchandise. I'm proud to say, I owned a Woody and Buzz doll as a kid. Not only that, but this led to Pixar and Disney to continue working together, creating more movies like A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., and Finding Nemo, to name some, with many other great movies being released. I can say with confidence that Toy Story is my favorite Pixar movie of all time. I can also say that Toy Story made me think for a long time that our toys came to life when we weren't looking. Catch it one day.